My name is Frank Seaman. I was born right here in Hyannis, Mass. on February 5th, 1933. I attended, graduated from Barnstable High School, class of 1950. We're the first class that went over 100. That same year, in February, I turned 17, February 1950. I joined the National Guard. I was assigned to Headquarters Battery, 685th AAA Gun Battalion. We were stationed up in Buzzards Bay. Captain Oscar Johnson was our commanding officer. He also lived in Centerville with me. And on Monday night drill nights, Oscar would put on his captain's hat and he'd pick me up in his brand new 1950 Mercury, and we'd drive up to Buzzards Bay and for drill. Well, after a year of Monday night drills, I got a little tired of that, so in February 1951, I got a release from the Guard and joined the regular Army. I took the train out of the old Hyannis train depot at East Main Street, Hyannis, up to Boston. And
joined the Army, right?
Right. And went to Boston Army Base where I was inducted and sworn in. And then from there we went up to Fort Devens, where I was processed and got my GI issue clothing, took some tests, and they asked me what I did for a job in civilian. Well, at 17, I drove a laundry route from Hyannis to P-Town. So I guess that set my course. I ended up down in Fort Lee, Virginia, to Quartermaster Replacement Training Center. I was assigned to Company D, 1st Platoon, and was being briefed and welcomed. The cadre asked, did anybody have prior military training? So I said, I raised my hand. I said, yeah, I was in the National Guard. And he says, good. He says, you're a squad leader. So that was good. Being a squad leader, I didn't have to pull KP or boiler duty. So then anyway, we finished basic training, went over to MOS training, which was supply record specialist. It was a 5 weeks course that included typing, which helped out later in my journey. In that course, I met 4 guys. We became very good friends. And at the end of the course, we all got orders to go to Korea.
When was that?
That was in, probably around July.
1951?
July 51. And went home for leave. And then we caught a train out of Boston for a 5-day trip across the country to Seattle. And we traveled with the general public, using the dining car and the sleeper car. And great trip. I still can hear the rhythm of the railroad tracks, you know, boom, 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 boom. Anyway, we got to Seattle and went up to Fort Lawton. We were put aboard the troop ship General M.M. Patrick for an 11-day trip across the Pacific to Yokohama. When we got on the ship, the troop commander, he assigned us, the 4 of us, to work on the ship's paper, Pat's Patter. This is where the typing came in handy. We were used to cut stencils for the mimeograph. Troop commander also figured, well, we're working on the paper, so he took us out of where all the troops were and put us in a room with 4 beds, a stateroom. Anyway, we got across the Pacific and we arrived in Yokohama with the band welcoming us, playing Stars and Stripes Forever and St. Louis Woman. And then from there we went up to Camp Drake, where we drew out our M1 rifles and combat gear. Rifle was in cosmoline, so we had to clean that up. Went to the range, zeroed it in, and then we got the four of us got orders to turn in our rifles, turn in our combat gear, and draw out some khakis. We were being sent down to Edajima, Japan, to a unit supply specialist school.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Edajima, Japan was on an island just to the south of Hiroshima.
Yeah.
And it used to be the Japanese Naval Academy, where General Admiral Yamamoto took his training.
Yeah.
And while we were there, General Ridgway paid a visit, and we got to see him with his hand grenades hanging on his lapels. And we did get to take a side trip over to Hiroshima to see what it looked like 5 years after the A-bomb.
Why? So you stayed there quite long there?
A month. We were there 4 weeks.
Okay.
And, excuse me, from there we went to, after we graduated from the supply course, we were sent down to Sasebo, where we drew out another rifle in cosmoline, cleaned it up, and our combat gear. And then we were put on a Japanese ferry.
Mm-hmm.
We sailed across to Busan.
When was that?
Let me see. That had to be around near the end of August or September. We got to Busan, we were put on a rail train and sent up to Chuncheon.
Mm-hmm.
As we pulled out of Busan, we saw the destroyed tanks and artillery pieces from the Battle of the Busan perimeter. And when we got up to Chuncheon, this is where the four of us went our separate ways. I never got to see any of those guys again. I was assigned to the 6th Medium Tank Battalion, 24th Infantry Division, which at that time was back in reserve, getting replacements, get built up to battle strength. So battalion trucks picked us up and took us up to where the battalion was back in reserve. And I was assigned to a headquarters service company.
In Chuncheon?
No, this was up where they were back in reserve.
Uh-huh.
They took us from Chuncheon up by truck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And anyway, I was assigned to the headquarters service company. The job would be to bring ammunition up from the south, to the rear, at the POL dumps and the ammo dumps. And anyway, after being there about a week, I was just finished eating breakfast, and I was out at the outside the mess tent washing my mess kit up in the barrels of water when Bed Check Charlie paid us a visit. He swooped down a propeller plane and strafed the mess tent, and then went over a little hill and strafed Charlie Company's mess tent and blew up the field stove. So that was my introduction to Bed Check Charlie. After 2 or 3 weeks, we moved up. We left to go up to a forward position for the fall offensive. And we were traveling by riverbed. And I was up in the truck up in the front. The tanks were traveling behind us, and we came under artillery attack. So we pulled over to the riverbank, jumped out of the truck, and hunkered down in the ditch, and the tanks buttoned up. And I'd say there was around 8 or 10 rounds came in. And finally, as quick as it started, it stopped, and the tanks opened up and gave the all clear. So then we continued on, and we set up the forward base at the foot of a large hill that was just recently taken by the infantry.
Mm-hmm.
And after we got settled, 3 of us climbed up the hill to see what it looked like, and there was quite a few dead enemy soldiers laying around, Chinese. I don't think they'd been there too long. Anyway, what did we do from then? I guess trying to figure that what I was doing was traveling to the rear to the POL dumps and the ammo dumps. The tanks ran on 90 octane gasoline, and their main armament was 90 millimeter, and then they had 50 calibers and two 30 caliber machine guns. So
what was the most dangerous moment during your service?
Most of my runs to the rear and to the tanks, when they were out on a mission, making runs to supply them with either gas or ammo, most of the runs were without incident. So, but two burned in my mind that happened, I'd say, in late October, early November of '51. I was making a gas run to a platoon of tanks, and I remember crossing a couple of Bailey bridges, and when I got near where the tanks were, I made a right turn around a hill, and there was an open valley, quite a long open valley, and the tanks were down at the end, up on the right, behind a little hill. So I pulled up with the tanks, backed up, dropped off the gas at the barrels that they requested. And after they gassed up, I backed around and picked up the empties. And it was getting late, quite late in the day, and the tank crew had invited me to join them in a gourmet meal of sea rations.
Gourmet.
So I was standing at the back of the tank and with the tank crew, and all of a sudden mortar rounds came in. So I jumped under the tank. The tankers jumped in the tanks and buttoned up. I would say about 4 or 5 rounds dropped in, and the tanks unbuttoned and gave the all clear. Evidently the mortar was taken out, I guess. And now it's getting quite late in the day, so I figured I better get back. So I headed back down that valley, and I had the pedal to the metal. And by the time I got down near the end of the valley, I made a left turn around the hill. All my tires were flat but two. So I had to pull over the side of the road, and there happened to be a half-track there. Now it was getting kind of dusk and the temperature was dropping, so the guys in the half-track invited me in to keep warm. And it turned out they were a radio relay track. So they telegraphed back to my outfit my problem. And about, I'd say, 11 o'clock, midnight, Deucenap pulled up with all the tires in the back, and we changed them out and got back to the company.
Where were you staying? Were you in the pop tent or in the barracks? Or
No, we were in, sometimes we're in pup tents, and sometimes we're in a tent that held 4 or 5 of us. Anyway, my next run that is really in my memory, we were making a night run to the tanks that are up on the MLR. I was riding shotgun. The truck, our truck was full of 90 millimeter. I guess we had about 200, 250 rounds of 90 millimeter. 50 caliber and 30 caliber machine gun boxes stacked up behind the cab of the truck. And let's see, it was a moonless night, dark. I think we were about the 3rd vehicle back, running by Cat Eye. And there was a Jeep and a 3/4 ton pulling a water trailer. And all of a sudden, a tremendous explosion, flash. The truck went up on its nose. The driver and I went flying out over the windshield. And I heard the driver go running up the road, and I jumped down in a ditch. I had my M2 carbine, and dead silence. I could smell the cordite and smoke drifting down. And then I heard a bunch of foreign talking and running, and I says, "Oh Jesus!" My heart's trying to pump right out of my chest. And well, anyway, that turned out to be a rock patrol that come running down to see what happened. And then somebody yelled, they hit a landmine. So I
Oh.
took a deep breath and got up out of the ditch, and they pulled up a couple of half tracks, and we transferred the load over to the half tracks and pushed the truck off the road and went up and completed the mission. And those are my two memorable deliveries. Others were incidental, so anyway, winter came in, started snowing, so we dug in for the winter. And then we heard that the 24th Division was going to be replaced by the 40th. So then we got a shipment of duffel bags in. And evidently it was a guy in our outfit, must have been a sign painter when he was a civilian, because he hand painted all our names and serial numbers on the bags. And he did a great job. And anyway, the day came when we were going to leave Korea. It was in February '52. Kind of a pleasant day. Sun was out, temperature in the teens, but we didn't get to leave till 10 o'clock at night in open trucks. And we had the Mickey Mouse boots with 2 layers of socks. And by the time we left, the temperature dropped down in the minuses. We took battalion trucks down to a point where we transferred over to Corps trucks. And the Corps trucks took us down to Chinchon. We stopped off to have coffee and donuts. And then we got back on the trucks and headed to Incheon. We didn't get to Incheon till in the morning. And the ship had the cargo holds floored over, so we loaded onto the ship and picked out a spot on the cargo hold and laid out our sleeping bag. And I took off my Mickey Mouse boots, and my 2 feet looked like 2 white prunes. After being warmed up a while, the blood got back into them, and they came looking back to normal feet again. And anyway, we heard that we were going to be stationed at South Camp Fuji, which is right on the base of Mount Fuji.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we left Incheon, but we didn't arrive back in.
When was it?
This was February '52.
Mm-hmm.
And we arrived back in Japan at night and got into our squad tents. And it was the first night I got to sleep between sheets and on a bed for about 6 months. Got up the next morning and stepped outside the tank, looked up, and there was Mount Fuji. So I spent the next 14, 15 months in Japan. Had another school down at Edajima of the M46 Patton tank. That was a 5-week school. When I come back from there, I got promoted to corporal. And after, I guess, 14 or 15 months, I finally got enough points to rotate back to the States. And I think it was the General Walker that I shipped back to San Francisco on. And from there, I flew back home for a leave. And then after the leave, I was back up in Fort Devens for reassignment. Well, they assigned me to Headquarters Battery, 144th AAA Gun Battalion, 44th Division in Seattle, in Fort Lewis, Washington. I was assigned to the motor pool. And after being there about 2 or 3 months, I was promoted to staff sergeant and took over the job of motor sergeant until discharge time came up. And about a week before I was to be discharged, my battery commander called me in. He wanted to send me to helicopter training.
Mm-hmm.
But the only catch was I'd have to re-enlist. So and the mess sergeant, he said he'd cook me a whole chicken dinner if I'd re-enlist. But I'd had enough. And anyway, I went over to North Fort Lewis and got discharged. Flew home. That was in February, 54. April of 54, I hired on to the New England Telephone Company and worked in the telephone business for 41 years and retired in 1995. All I can say is I came through career unscathed, and I'm here today.
Why do you think that the Korean War has been called as forgotten?
Because it was forgotten. When I came home, nobody didn't know where I'd been. The Korean War wasn't even mentioned, talked about. Life just went on.
Why? Why people didn't pay any attention to Korean
Well,
War?
I think wars are bad, but actually back in the States it was a good time, the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, I don't think people just paid any attention to it.
What do you think is the importance of Korean War?
Well, you look at South Korea and you look at North Korea,
Mm-hmm.
I think that proves it right there what the importance was. What would have happened if we did intervene and North Korea took over South Korea?
Mm-hmm.
The whole peninsula would be the same way, isolated and crazy.
Have you been back to Korea?
No, I don't. I wouldn't recognize it. From what I've heard, it's quite a different place today.
Yeah, this is 7th largest trading partner to the United States, 11th largest economy in the world.
Right.
11th.
I can remember taking trips back to Chuncheon, and I think I made one trip down to Seoul to pick up some kind of rations, and I would never recognize it today, I'm sure.
It's full of buildings, you know, subways, so many bridges over the Han River.
No Bailey bridges.
So you did a nice job to save us.
For years, I never thought back on it until the Cape and Islands KWVA was started, got together. I was a charter member. In fact, I brought the prime time deal with a picture on me that was taken back in '97. Only then did I start thinking about career again. Nobody ever talked about it. And I'm not comfortable talking about it anyway, about myself. So.
Mm-hmm. This year, 2013, is the 60th anniversary of Armistice.
Right.
And U.S.-Korea alliance. What do you think about that? That the Korea is still divided and still at war technically.
Right.
What do you think?
No, I really don't know. How long it's going to be that way? It may be that way for probably as long as I'm on this planet. I don't know.
Do you think that the American government should support for the reunification of the Korean Peninsula?
Sure. I mean, that's what we went there for originally. You know, why throw it all away?
We talked about the first Korean War Veterans Descendant Workshop in Washington, D.C. in July. My foundation, the Korean War Veterans Digital Memorial, will fund that workshop. Would you be willing to talk to your grandkids and asking them to participate in it?
The one oldest one, she'll be 17 next month.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll do that.
You will do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a lifetime opportunity to meet with other Korean War veterans' descendants, and they can do a lot about the legacy of the Korean War and your service. So it will be great to have your grandson.
Daughter.
Granddaughter? Oh, even better. Yeah, it will be great. ask her to join us, okay? Yeah. Any other message that you want to leave with this interview?
Well, like I said, I came through Korea unscathed, and I'm here today.
How do you assess the impact of your service in the Korean War upon your life? What kind of impact does that have on you?
Well, I think from the day I was born, it was meant to be. I wouldn't change any of it because I'm happy where I am today.
Did your service help you about your career after you discharged from the military?
No, actually, they were unrelated. It's a what do I want to say? Luck of the draw, and you play the hand you dealt. And I was sitting at home, and a friend of my father's stopped by and said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, why don't you join the telephone company?" So that's how I got in the telephone company. It's just, like I say, luck of the draw.
Any message to our young generation about your service, about military, about nation and the war?
Like I say, I have a grandson who put 8 years in the Marines. He served 2 tours in Iraq and a tour in Afghanistan. He was discharged as a sergeant in the Marines. And he's quite a changed person after that. So, I don't know.
Frank, thank you very much for your service, and your sacrifice has a direct impact upon what Korea is right now. And thank you for your time and willingness to share your story with the foundation so that your memories will be preserved in the Korean War Veterans Digital Memorial Foundation's website.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again.